record webinar so that you can have it for future reference, but also in case there are any members of your team who are important to your data entry and submission process, we want to make sure that they can relive this very fun webinar, and you'll be able to send that along. So this will be recorded, and with that, I'd like to remind everybody that that means every side conversation and typing that we're able to hear will also be on our recording. So I'll ask you at this point to go ahead and put yourself on mute if you haven't yet, just to make sure that any side conversations or multitasking isn't a distraction to our conversation. So as I mentioned, that is Angela on the call right now. I also have my teammates here from MPHI in the room, and I'll let them introduce themselves so you know who's talking when we switch around.
I'm Carrie Soroka. I work here at MPHI on the data team.
Hi everyone, it's Paul Jacobson. I'm sure that we're all very familiar with each other, either through email, in-person contact, or phone, or one way or the other. So it's good to be meeting with everybody today, virtually.
Thank you. We, of course, want to know who is there from our NSP team. So I think we'll do just a quick roll call so we know who's here with us. I'll go through our list of all of our NSP teams, and if you'll let us just know who's on the call with us today, it'd be greatly appreciated. So just fair warning, I'm going alphabetically. So Cheryl, that's going to put you and your team on first. Can you tell us who's joining us from Berrien?
It's me, Cheryl, and my administrative assistant, Susan.
Thank you for joining us today, Cheryl and Susan. Who's with us today?
This is Michelle Datema, and my administrative assistant works in the morning, so it's just me.
I will be sure to get the link out to you, Michelle, so that Monique can kind of follow along on her own pace when she's in the office.
Okay, I'm going to try to switch audio, so if you can't hear me, I'll come back.
Sounds good. Thank you for the warning. How about our Detroit team? Who's on the call with us today?
Lynette here. Hi, Angela. How are you?
Hi, Lynette. So happy to hear your voice.
And we have our director here, Sharon. We have one of our data administrative persons here, Katie.
Well, and Sharon and Katie, thank you for joining. How about friends and Flint? Hurley, who's on the call? If you're talking, friends at Hurley, we cannot hear you, so be sure to get yourself off of mute. I'll come back around and see if anybody's able to join from Hurley at the end of our roll call. Do we have participation from our Ingham team? Nola, our team, if you are talking, we can't hear you. We'll come back around to Ingham and at the end of roll call. Mizzou.
Hello, everyone. It's Julie, and my administrative assistant is on spring break, so it's just me.
Well, thank you for joining, Julie. And again, we'll make sure that we get all of the information over to your teammates so that they can review those things as well. Great, thanks for joining. Our team, who's on the call?
Hi, this is Cindy Laurie from Kent County. I am here alone.
Cindy, it's great to hear your voice. We are happy to have you back on the team.
I am back for a little while. Thank you.
Our friends, who's here from Oakland?
It's Marcy, and I have my administrative assistant, Heather.
Hi, and Heather. Happy Thursday.
Heather's on spring break.
Well, I'd like to say that it's probably because MIECHV benchmark data mission is so exciting she didn't want to miss it. So let's go to our Saginaw team. Anyone Saginaw joining?
Hi, this is Leanne. Rebecca's with me, and Deb will be joining in a little bit.
Leanne, Rebecca, thank you for joining. I'm going to go back and see if anybody's joined us from our Hurley team. Anyone
Angela,
from Ingham on the call?
Michelle, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can, Michelle.
Okay. Good.
Welcome back. Nola or anyone else from Ingham, are you there? Okay.
No vacation this week, so I don't know if anybody from her team is.
Okay, well, I'll be sure, no matter what, to be connecting back with the teams that don't have representation today, and of course, that's one of the reasons why we record this. So I'll connect with them, but in the meantime, I think that we'll go ahead and get started. Just to give everyone kind of a brief synopsis of what we plan to talk about today. You already got a clue of that in some of our previous conversations and in the email that I sent out. But essentially, we are getting ready to finally move forward with the request that we've been getting for so long of getting rid of that hard copy submission process. So with that is going to come a couple tweaks and updates to our overall process. So we are going to start out today with an overview of this updated process and what that means for us moving forward in terms of your benchmark data submission. We're just going to go ahead after that and go step by step. So we will talk about each of those critical steps in MIECHV and the Michigan Home Visiting and Initiative data collection, entry, and submission. So we can talk really about what's the same and what's different. We're going to show you one of the things that we've created to help really facilitate this change, and we're going to give you a demonstration of one of our quality assurance modules in REDCap. Paul is going to share some of his tips from an expert that he's come across in his time and tenure of getting through all of your forms and share some of his tips for high-quality data entry and submission. Of course, I really want to make sure that everybody is asking questions along the way. We'll have some pointed times in between slides to ask questions. Ask along the way, but know that at the end of our time together, we'll be sure to have some reserved time to have any questions and answers that you might have. And of course, we'll end with next steps of what does this actually mean on the ground in terms of when is this being rolled out, what dates do we need to pay good attention to, and what do we need to do in the meantime. So getting back into sort of the greater purpose, what is this all about? And none of this is new to any of you. So we know that hard copy submission is time consuming for all. We've heard this from the get-go, sending us the paper copies, getting the certified mail or the certified packet in the mail. This is something that has been very cumbersome all along for you all, and it means that our good friend Paul here is buried up to his eyeballs in his office in a lot of paper forms. So we know this is time consuming, this is cumbersome, all of these hard copy forms. So as a reminder, our NFP teams started entering all of their MIECHV benchmark electronically in the REDCap online system in July of 2015. So you'll remember that last summer we tried this out to see what things looked like if you all were entering your data yourselves at your sites, with the hopes that we would then be able to move away from hard copy submission. Now, you'll also remember that in the meantime, we were asking you to sort of double duty. You were entering into REDCap and you were sending us your hard copy forms, and that was very strategic so that we could make sure that all along we were monitoring very closely how data were being collected in the field, how they were being entered, and how your data are being reflected essentially in our federal reporting. So there was a pretty time spent in quality assurance of how things were going, and we are finally at the point where we can move away from hard copy form submission. Paul will tell you this later, and he's, I'm sure, already told you this along the way to individual teams. We have seen electronic data entry and submission just improve by leaps and bounds in the last few months. And I have a hunch that there was that carrot being dangled of getting rid of hard copy submission to us was a really powerful wonderful thing for your team. So kudos to you all for transitioning so well to the electronic data entry and submission process, and we are really excited to be ready for the next step and really be able to attend to that request that we've had for a long time of getting rid of sending us those hard copy forms. So just giving you an overview, as I mentioned, I'm going to dive a bit deeper into each of these processes, but just an overview so that you can see what's the same and what's different. When it comes to those handy-dandy data reminders that you get from Paul every month, we heard loud and clear that those were really, really critical resources for your teams. So the data reminders will not change. You will still get a monthly reminder from Paul. Data collection also has not changed. Just like when we made the move over to REDCap data entry, we were hopefully really, really clear that this has nothing to do with data collection. Those federal reporting requirements have stayed the same, and it looks like the same process. Data itself into REDCap looks the same. There's something new here that we're going to introduce, and that's the data quality check. So I'll give you a little bit more insight into our updated process. The submission will change just a little bit. We have a couple of tweaks to really make some space and accommodate for hard copy forms no longer coming to MPHI. And the rectifications that you'll get from MPHI because of some of these changes have been updated as well. And we'll talk more in depth about those in a minute. So going into each of those steps, let's start with the data reminders. So I mentioned this earlier. We are not going to change this process. I really did hear very loudly from you all that your teams find a lot of value in a data reminder process. So my incredibly clever team here figured out a way for us to continue that without getting your hard copy forms, and this process will remain the same. So you can all expect to get that monthly electronic checklist of all of the forms we expect are due during the time period for data submission. You'll still be getting those monthly from Paul. So that piece will not change, and your teams will continue to have that resource as a way to have sort of on your radar what we expect will be in the next submission. I said a collection hasn't changed. Our federal reporting requirements are for this piece of the process the same as before. We're asking your nurse home visitors to continue to collect the MIECHV benchmark data through all of the work that you're putting into ETO, and those two extra pieces, the supplemental data collection form and the protective factors survey, at those particularly prescribed intervals that we talk about in our data training and that are on your forms. So at enrollment, postpartum, and then 6-month intervals until the family either exits or graduates from the program at 24 months. This is all the same. The forms haven't changed, and your team's process for getting the information through interview from your families, this all the same. Data entry is also the same. So once all of your data are collected through the supplemental data collection form and the protective factor survey, each of you have developed your own system for how the data are getting from your nurse home visitors and into our REDCap data system, and that's something that's happening at the team level, and each of your teams, like I said, have developed some really clear and efficient processes for getting this in, and this is not changing. That's where we start to have some differences. So essentially, our data quality check, this is a piece that's in some ways being transferred from us to you guys. So one of the things that Paul does when he gets your hard copy forms is he conducts a pretty good into what is filled out by your home visitors. So he looks for missing values, he looks for values that are illogical, and he really checks to make sure that all of the forms are complete and all of the answers make good sense with what we're asking. So we're transferring that over to your teams because we will no longer have those hard copy forms to be able to check against. So we are going to walk you through this in just a minute, but we've actually created a program in REDCap that can be run to find any data entry errors. And we'll ask that after everything is entered, your teams will then run the quality assurance module and be able to correct your own data entry errors that you would be getting in that very long list that you sometimes get from Paul of rectifications for the month. As you get acclimated in running these quality assurance modules, we'll ask that when you submit your monthly checklist back to Paul, letting him know what you've submitted that month in REDCap, that you're also sharing with us a screenshot that your modules were run that month. And we can talk your team through doing that if you have any questions. So data submission has changed just a little bit as well. The deadlines are the same. We're still asking that all data are entered by the 5th business day of the month after data collection occurs. You'll use those electronic reminder checklists that you'll get from Paul the previous month to keep track of everything that you're entering in REDCap, just like you were before and have been since last summer. Your electronic checklists of everything that your team has entered into REDCap will still be able to be sent by email to Paul. And here are a couple of the differences that we're really focusing on in the data submission aspect of our process. So as I mentioned, the data quality check is going to fall within the responsibility of each individual team. So before you consider your data submitted for the month, we'll ask you to run the REDCap Quality Assurance module and correct any errors that come up. This really is replacing the step in the process that Paul sends you a list of rectifications of values missing, or wondering if a 0 should be a 6 or a yes should be a no, or why something is blank. That's replacing this. So you'll run the quality assurance module and correct any errors in data entry. The part where people should start getting excited. You do not have to send us your hard copy forms now. You can then, you can skip going to the post office, and once your rectifications are complete, you can store and file your hard copy forms at your agency. So kudos and congratulations for getting here. We know you are very excited for being able to no longer have to send us those hard copy forms. And remember, when you run those quality assurance modules, we're just asking for a screenshot of your completed QA modules that you can submit when you send Paul your email with your completed checklist that month. That you still will be getting rectifications from MPHI, specifically from Paul. This will look a little bit differently, and this will be specific to the absence or presence of forms that were expected or unexpected. So Paul is going to compare what you send over to him on your electronic checklist with what we expected to get that month, and he may be sending you a list of questions of forms or ETO IDs that we thought would be included in the submission that wasn't. So you'll still be getting that connection with Paul at the end of your submission process. So we are going to dive a little bit deeper into those quality assurance modules, but that is the overview of what the process looks like right now. We will talk about dates a little bit of when this is actually going to roll out. But based on what you've heard so far, team, what are your reactions or what are your questions that come up?
This is Cindy. And of course, I think mental catch-up, but the only question that kind of comes to quickly, so it really should not have to mail anything to you, right? I should be able to electronically send back my list, and in the comments, if there's something that was expected is not going to be in the REDCap for that month, I can write that in there. And I can also electronically send my screenshot, correct?
Absolutely correct, Cindy. So moving forward in terms of these pieces of benchmark data submission, there will be no hard copy forms or mail that needs to come our way.
Thank you.
Welcome. Other questions or reactions, comments, or concerns come up when we talk about this change, team? Know that you can ask questions along the way here today on the webinar, or as you go back to your teams and let it marinate a little bit in the coming weeks. I'll ask you to send me emails or give me a call if you have any questions. So we're going to talk a little bit more in depth of that data quality step in which we're asking teams to conduct that REDCap QA module. And for that, I'm going to pass you along to my colleague, Carrie Soroka. And here's Carrie.
Everyone, thank you for letting me join in today. I am going to talk just a little bit about that QA module, as Angie mentioned. She also had let you know that this module is pre-programmed into REDCap and that it will catch some of the errors or some of the data questions that come up through the rectification process and review that Paul has typically been doing. And we will also touch back on this, but the result of this will be a screenshot that can be sent in with your checklist. So I will show you what that looks like. And I'm actually just going to dive into the whole concept and define this and show you what it is as we talk through it. So we've been talking about this term, the QA module. The QA module is this quality control module. I have a little handy pen on my screen. Can any of you see that if I wipe it around? That feature is not working for us today. So I will just verbally talk you through what I would be pointing at on the screen. So actually what I'm hoping to point at is that red circle with the big arrow that shows you where you can find the data quality module. You've probably noticed that there's a lot of different links on the left and most frequently use either the dashboard or the add edit records. Today we're going to take a little bit of time and look at what happens when you click in the data quality module. That brings you to this screen here. Data quality module is built in by REDCap, and so it automatically comes with a whole bunch of things in it and some things that we built special. And all of the things that I'm talking about in here are a list of rules. And rule sounds a little harsh, but it's really just a guideline that's programmed into the software to help find questions and concerns. And so you will see that some of these rules and guidelines actually don't work well for our form and don't serve our purposes at all. So I'm only going to talk about a couple of these, despite the length of the list that you see here. You see that the list starts out with some concepts such as missing values, and we'll talk a little bit about what each of these are. Paul will walk you through the ones that we run, show you how they work and what happens. I'll toss the ball over to Paul, and I'm going to jump in occasionally with some other tidbits of info as well.
Hello, everybody. So hopefully this is going to be relevant to everybody. I realize that it'll be most meaningful for those direct their hands on the data that are handling the REDCap entry, but hopefully this will be interesting and relevant for everybody. So let's take a look at a few things here with a module, just in terms of what we're going to be doing to look at the data issues. So under that rules column on the left there, you see that there are A through H. Actually, you're going to see a partial shot of it right here, but later on in the next few slides, you'll see a full list. So we're going to have A through H listed. We're going to have a 1 through 4 listed. Again, you'll see that full list later on. So when you do your quality checks in REDCap, you're going to be only concerned with A through H and then 1 through 4. So rules B and D and 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm sorry, let me restate that, make sure I said that right. It's rules B and D within the A through H that we'll focus on, and the 1, 2, 3, and 4. So in order to run any particular rule, to find potential areas that do need attention, you're going to first check on execute, click on execute, which you can see there on the far right and circled. The button is going to produce a numerical value, which ideally, and hopefully it's going to produce a 0, but that's not always going to be the case. So, move next one now. Sometimes things that are going to need to be corrected, and if they are, you'll now see them in this bright, sort of obnoxious red color that you can't miss there. You're going to want to click on View, which you see to the right of that numerical value which was generated. And then once you have the results from clicking on View, you're going to see each individual record that does need attention. It's listed by the ETO. If multiple items that will require your attention from one form, you're going to see them listed individually. So you see a bunch of different items and completely natural, and that could just very well be from having items within one form. So that individual separation is going to look like a potential long list, but it might just be a couple forms in there. So to view the error that you'll get over that second column there that says discrepant fields with values, and you want to click on what's underlined in the parentheses there. Point red cap is going to pull up the form that has the question that will require your attention. And then identify the issue and the red cap entry, please enter the correcting information for that item. And if there are frequently individual forms that have multiple missing items, I would just review the entire form. When it's pulled up there, correct the error or the errors, and then on Save Record, once again at the bottom of the form, to make sure that you keep the changes that you've made. And just to summarize again, what the individual rules are that you'll need to click on to produce those potential errors. They are the rule, and specifically that's missing values in required fields, and the D rule, and those are out-of-range errors. And I'll give you an example. That might be an ETO that you've entered with 7 digits accidentally. And then 1 through 4, 1 is missing a yes or a no response from a protected factors survey that you had indicated was complete. 2 would be missing a yes or no response from a home that you had indicated was complete. 3, a home score outlier. That just means that a numeric entry that doesn't fall within the acceptable range for a given item. And finally, 4, that's going to be EFS outlier, and really don't have to even worry about that because you're not able to even enter a value that's outside of 1 through 7 in the PFS. We put that in there last. Just run that module if you like, and just enjoy seeing the 0 if you're having a rough day.
I'm going to dive in really quick as and kind of look at a couple little things we've seen through these last 2 slides here. And I'm going to toggle us quickly back so I can take a moment and dwell on this little list you see here underneath the discrepant fields with the values. And there's a bunch of gibberish under there. You're kind of wondering sort of what to do with this. As Paul mentioned, you can navigate through here. You don't need to know what all of those symbols are, but I'll take a minute and tell you what's here. You can see on the left that's the record number, which is an ETO ID, and in this case it's a demo one I put in there, so you will see actual real IDs. And these gibberish words here are actually what we use in the data side of things on what we call the back end of the data system to link the data field with the actual question. So for those of us that do the data work in the back end, that's our little label for that question. We don't expect you to learn them or to know what they are or to even have to try and think or worry about it. You might end up over time kind of getting to know them a little bit, but all you really need to worry about is clicking on the blue text to the right, and it will take you right to the question and turn it green, as you can see. So I don't want you to have to worry about what all those values are.
And I can correct my error directly from that screen.
The screen that opens up here that we see on the upper right-hand side of the slide, that's that section of the form. It happened to create the screenshot. I had clicked on the blue text, and it just popped that open into the main window. So from there, you're directly in the right record. You can scroll up and down. You can go back and see the ETO ID and the visit time point and things of that nature, which can help you out once you're in that record. Head also to the screen here where Paul was giving you the overview of which modules to run. I'll take a quick second to mention the main reasons we're running some of these others is because they actually just don't even work right in here. So you'll notice on the top, very top of the screen, it says execute rules all. You could click the all button and run them all. Nothing bad will happen. Your computer may take a little while, but it won't break down or melt down or anything. But you might get a bunch of really big red numbers that even if you click on them, there's nothing to do with that. And the reason for that is, for example, the outlier numbers actually is based on a standard deviation. So given the ETO IDs and such things, tons of show up in there, and it's a valid data entry. So it can get a bit confusing to try to waddle through some of those other rules. If you're interested in using them and want to use them, please feel free to touch base with us and let us know what your questions are, what you would like to do, and we can help you walk through how to use this system for that. We also said that some people might like to run these all of the time. They might like to run them every time they enter data, and other people might only want to run it right before they send data in. There's pros and cons to both. You're welcome to click those buttons whenever you want. Some people find it really helpful to do, as Angie mentioned, each time you're entering data, and then you can address your issue right away before the form's even filed. Some people prefer to do that in bulk. You're welcome to approach that however you want. Know that if you're running it in the middle of a data entry period, depending on how your program uses it, you may have some half-entered forms that one home visitor maybe entered part of theirs, and then somebody else was running it, and then you might find some of their things showing up in missing fields when they, are just working on completing data entry. We see that occasionally as well, so that's absolutely fine. I just wanted to bring it up into everyone's awareness so you know when you're clicking in it what you're seeing. At least I'll take one quick last moment to talk about this big red 106 that we see here. You can see that through everybody's efforts, actually all the other numbers are really low. 2, 1, 1, and a 0. Feel good, yay! But the 106 is actually a bit of a larger number, and what we've done is there's so many forms, as everybody's mentioned, that we have done a standard practice in data quality check, which is to check a portion of the forms coming in. So there are some forms that perhaps weren't under this type of review in the past. So when your program runs this, you might find that you have a number sitting in that B, missing value, waiting for you. With that, everybody will have an opportunity to go back in and address those over time, but we know that might take a little bit of time. So we do not have an expectation that that is immediately addressed in these next couple of weeks. But we will work with all of you as the weeks and the months go on to work on getting that down to a 0 along with the others.
I question Cindy, but my other question is, some of these for which I will never the information. It's not a form, it was gotten, I can get it. What do I do now?
As you mentioned, that's one of the reasons there's 106 there. There might be, due to circumstances, the fact that there's forms and families and events for which there's a data point that's missing. The goal of the module is to give you a tool whereby which you can return to forms and check and see what's there. You'll find that over time you'll have your own process for deciding which items are going to need continually to be addressed and which things are an old case that's no longer relevant. And we'll work with all the sites as we go on month to month as you see that number and you see what it is and you have a chance to review it and say, you know what, I already know there's 20 things in here that I already know just are blank. That's fine. It's meant to be as that the next month then 20 are blank, but the next time when you get 25 that there might be 5 to look at. And I believe there's also, I'm going to toggle our screen here. You'll see this middle window that shows the rules in the list. It says discrepant fields, then steps. There is an additional column to the right where you can ignore that case. So if you're trying to set up something where perhaps the data manager is trying to give results to home visitors, you might find that handy in creating some smaller lists that are relevant and taking out cases that are not.
And good question, Cindy. And we know that there are data points that just by this being a real world data collection scenario, we know that there will be some data points that are missing. What we're really getting at here is that we're asking teams to make sure that when a value is missing, that it's because it for lots of really good reasons was not able to be collected in the field, rather than it was mistakenly left out of data entry.
I'm going to go one more place with this.
Sure.
This number will show up every month. Is for me to say, this one I will never get, please take it off my list.
Question. I believe that the tool is just talking about where you can exclude the case. I believe as a temporary fix, but will come back up again. But REDCap actually, the reason you hear some doubt and hesitation in my voice is REDCap just went through some upgrades. They went up a couple versions recently. And so one of the things they've made some changes in was the reporting in this module. So I will revisit that and provide some information for Paul and Angie on possible ways. It might be that something that they modified in the system. So I'm looking.
Because, you know, like 5 years from now, and now my number's 493, and I'm wading through 493 trying to find the 3 that I stuck on the time.
I totally hear you. And actually, it was a question I originally had a year ago, and we started moving over to this. I kept thinking, well, okay, there might be some things. I mean, we just know that over time. There's some things missing and things of that nature. But I think that one of the things I've been impressed with seeing is that through all of your work and through Paul's work, actually, I'm just amazed. It's been a whole year of data in here, and we do have, the numbers we see on the screen right here are actually across everybody. So across all of the programs, we have 106 fingering in the B, which is probably just because they're things that weren't part of that percentage of forms that we checked. And there's only 2 in D, so I find it really exciting and encouraging that there may be lingerers, and I believe there will be across everybody, but hopefully it's not a burdensome number. I definitely hear what you're saying, and to try and address that, I will see what I can learn by revisiting the REDCap upgrades and the version changes, and see if there are new tools for helping people manage that.
Okay.
For ask.
I also have a question in regard to that as well.
Mm-hmm.
Would that be included? You have some clients, we have very few clients that entered in before REDCap was part of the process. That being said, they may have started off with their assessment being first a 6-month assessment. Is the number incorporated into this number of those that started off with a 6 months? So will it show delinquent in enrollment and postpartum?
So we're wondering if the absence of the enrollment form would show up as a red number?
Yes.
It will not. Nope.
Thank you.
So actually, and that being said, it also will not help somebody find missing cases or data as well. So I guess that's the flip side there. I have a quick overview here that basically just captures everything we talked about. You know, run those modules that Paul pointed out. You can capture a screenshot, take a photo on your phone. You know, if you're in trouble finding working for your computer and our emails, please feel free to let us know. We'll help you find something that's working out. After you run it, you can follow up on those concerns that you can follow up on and send that shot over to MPHI. If there's any other questions on the module while we are wrapping that portion of the presentation?
Boy, sorry, but this is Cindy again, and I do have one more question. However, we'll continue to track the people that are due for forms, but at any point will be, didn't get it for the lady or whatever, no difficulty. We're not held responsible for the ones that program when the infant turned 6 months. She was lost to service. She didn't come back till the baby was almost 9 months. That's still fine.
About then the subsequential forms, so if there's enrollment and a postpartum, if there's no month form.
Right. And because she was lost to service and didn't return till the baby's 9 or 10 months old, that is the same, right? It won't error anywhere.
Correct number. There is the exit form option in there that you can use to show that there's no more forms expected and anticipated.
Okay.
So we that the piece of the rectification process where Paul is going to be paying attention to what you all enter into REDCap and what we expect. In a case where maybe a family hasn't been discharged from NFP, like you say you see them for enrollment and postpartum, but family, you can't find the family, or you're not able to complete their 6 months, their 6-month visit within the window that we ask you to. If they then pop back and you do see the 12-month visit, that is something that Paul is checking, and one of the things that you'll communicate with him when he says, hey, where's the 6-month visit on this family? And you'll say, oh, you know, they moved, or they were not reachable during that time point, but we're picking back up on the 12-month visit. You'll be communicating with Paul about that, and he'll be tracking that.
Thank you.
Yeah, Cindy, in a formal way to document that's part of the usefulness of the checklist, which is also the data reminders that I do send out. So that's within that notes section. That's a good place to indicate that if that's a form that I've inquired about, and there is a temporary discharge, the client hasn't been located, that visit was missed. That's where you can inform me of that, is on the checklist that comes back to us.
Good, thank you.
Great. Data quality now, and what I'm going to do is just talk about some common errors that I've seen. And I want to start, though, by saying that over the last few numbers of months, we've seen, Angie already alluded to this, but we've seen fewer and fewer issues with the quality of the hard copies and the recap entries. I just wanted to stress that first and thank everybody. There's been a really noticeable shift, and that's great. So when I do review the paper copies and red cap entries, there's just a few patterns. So you'll just see there's a few things on here that I want to talk about real quickly. So we've got the type of error on there, and to the right of that, we've got the correction required. The first one there is a hard copy entry, and the red cap entry doesn't match for a question. That's pretty straightforward. So moving forward, without MPHI having access to the hard copies, it's going to be particularly important to carefully enter your red cap responses. It sounds very obvious, but honestly, this is the most critical point that I'll probably address here, and I just wanted to sort of highlight that one. As we do move towards eliminating the paper copy submissions, and accuracy of the information that's going to be entered in red cap will really be in your hands. So the modules will inform you of missing responses and outliers in red cap, but it's not going out to us, for example, when a yes response was really supposed to be no. So this is just a reminder to please be extra careful with ensuring that your paper copy responses match your red cap entries. Some folks that are directly touching the data and doing the red cap aren't here today. It's nice that we'll have the PowerPoint presentation available later in the recording for those folks too to review. So, what process you find best, whether it be through double checking an entry after it's done. I'll do that at times, or just slowing down when entering. Whatever method you find is helpful and useful, that's fantastic. Second one here we have listed is the time frame not checked correctly. Again, I've seen this change dramatically for the better as it's gone along. You know that with a hard copy on that page 2, at the very top, we've got the point entries there, and it begins with enrollment postpartum, and I think that's probably where confusion enters. But as a real simple way of managing that confusion, if there is any, is just to use the boldface as your guide to entering the correct box, and if you even just ignore everything else and just focus on the visit and then what's in boldface for the time frame, you will get that correctly. But just as a reminder, it doesn't start with the enrollment data that's going in. It starts with the postpartum through the 24-month visit. So keep that in mind, and I think that's kind of just a helpful tool to have there. So the third one on there is the protective factors survey. Response or responses are sometimes left blank. So please make sure that all items within the PFS have been responded to, and if you have indicated in red cap that it was completed. And with the PFS, once you check yes, indicating that it's been completed in red cap, there's really still nothing that's going to prohibit you from leaving a response or responses blank. So red cap will allow you to move on, and we're not going to be able to pick up on that. So this item has been addressed. Just remember, as a reminder, to please make sure that those responses are all completed in red cap. Fourth one is responses left blank on the service needs and referrals table. This was more of an issue really before REDCap was in place. It was a lot of confusion probably on both ends in terms of how this is completed. REDCap has taken care of a lot of the natural confusion and errors that might occur there. But just if you make sure that you've checked no, this is, if I'm saying now, it's within this part of it. Just make sure that you've checked no on that final box in a referral that indicates that all the possible stages of the referral have been addressed. And I've seen that sometimes that final no isn't checked to indicate when the referral steps are complete. So if all 4 boxes are checked yes, then you just move on to this one. But if it's less than all 4, you do need to check no on that final box before moving to the referral. That last one, number 5, clients been discharged early. We were just talking about exits or early discharges and those kinds of issues. If they have been discharged early and we aren't aware of their status. So for clients that do discharge early, they transfer, they're re-enrolled after a temporary discharge. Please update us on these changes as soon as you can. And so they're very timely. We're just talking about this. The checklist is where you can indicate that in the notes section if I've requested it. You can put, certainly come in an email or a phone call as well, but as long as we're getting it in a timely fashion so that we have our information up to date. And real benefit to this is that we're not going to keep bugging you for this and other circumstances like this that we weren't aware of. We won't keep asking you for forms that aren't going to be there in the future. So that's really it for some of the common things that we've seen. Any questions about those things that is through? And I'll just add to that last point, you can always contact me at a time when there's a situation that should come up when a discharge transfer, temporary charge has, been re-enrolled, or you need help regarding what to do. I'm happy to provide that.
So we'll be talking about the QA modules and some of Paul's helpful hints for high-quality data collection, tree, and submission. I wanted to just plant one seed for you all just to kind of think about as we move through this transition and this process. And really it revolves around compromise, if you might call it that. I would call it more of an opportunity. But what this really means to get away from our hard copy submission, heard, you can tell that we aren't going to be able to, as MPHI, catch every single data error that is made in terms of data entry. This is a responsibility that with no longer having to mail us the hard copy forms, this is a responsibility that is being transferred to your individual team. So as it's always been, our goal is for the highest quality of data being represented in our reporting over to our state partners and over to HRSA. So we really do thank you all in advance for all the work that you put into getting acclimated to the REDCap system, to really get acclimated to the home visiting benchmark data collection process. And moving forward, I just want to thank you all in advance for all of the careful attention that you're putting into data entry and using those tools that we've created to really be able to catch and correct any errors that just naturally always happen when you're dealing with large pieces of data. Kind of recap some of these changes in data submission. You're collecting data along the way, and by the close of each month, this really should truly be by the 5th business day of the next month, all data are entered into REDCap Online. Each individual team is responsible for reviewing their monthly submission before we consider it complete, and we'll ask you to do that by making sure that all of the data that have been requested through Paul's monthly reminder have been entered. Your teams are checking forms for completedness. As always, we are asking teams to be scanning forms for anything that's personally identifiable and removing it. We want to make sure that at the end of your submission, you are reviewing the data reminder checklist that you get from Paul to make sure that everything's been entered or that you have indicated notes and that all new enrollments and early exits are included in the reminder checklist. You've heard me say that you'll then be able to, as always, email that complete data reminder checklist over to Paul along with the screenshot of your QA module completion. That will go to Paul electronically. It's your checklist. He's going to be able to kind of crosswalk that against what we expected to see from your team that month. So you'll be receiving a rectification from Paul that says, hey, we thought this form might be here, but it's not. And you'll be able to respond to him and let him know maybe why a form wasn't entered or that maybe we won't be expecting that form. So you'll still work each month with Paul through what will end up being a shorter list of rectifications from MPHI. I really hope this goes without saying, team, that we want to hear from you if this is confusing or if you have concerns about the process. So please don't hesitate to contact us for help and assistance in this new process. We will absolutely be there right next to you to provide coaching, technical assistance, training, for anything regarding, as always, data collection, data your clearance and your data, any data exports, as Carrie mentioned. If you want to start playing with your data in different ways through REDCap, we can work with you on that. And we ask, just as we did when we first done REDCap, do not use the link within the REDCap site to email the REDCap administrator unless you're having issues with logging onto your account. Just connect back with us if you're having any issues, like technical issues with REDCap itself. So I'm going to breeze through this really quickly because I think that this has been made pretty clear, but there are some things that remain the same and some things that are different. Reminders, data and data collection are the same. Data entry is also going to be the same with one sort of intermediary step between entry and submission, and that's running that REDCap QA module, taking a screenshot of the module when you've completed it and sending it over to Paul with your checklist. When you do that data submission every month, it's still going to be by the 5th business day, including everything that was collected the month before. And you'll send your checklist along with your screenshot of your QA modules that are completed over to Paul by email. He'll then be able to, like I said, crosswalk what was entered with what we expected, and he'll be sending possibly questions of anything that we thought might be entered but isn't. And what's different about this process is that your rectifications from Paul each month are not going to include data errors, because you'll be catching those with the QA modules and correcting them. So you won't be getting those longer lists from Paul about missing values or making sure that a yes should indeed be yes, or why something is left blank. So the rectifications will be a little bit different conceptually, but you'll still be getting connections with Paul every month about maybe expected forms that we aren't finding in REDCap. When we talk about our next steps in the process, what I'd ask you all is whether it's you passing this on to somebody else in your team who is in charge of data entry, but we really would love every team to be able to practice running those REDCap QA modules and loop back to us if you have any questions. April 7th data session is going to be the last that includes your hard copy mailing. So the May 6th data submission, and that's going to cover all data that are collected in April. That's going to be your first submission that does not include hard copy forms sent over to MPHI. So just to kind of wrap it up in terms of what we expect with that May 6th data submission, we hope that by May 6th, your individual team will have all forms that are collected in April of 2016 entered into REDCap. You'll run REDCap QA module, you'll find some errors likely, and you will correct them, taking a screenshot of your completed QA modules when you're all done. You'll set updated electronic checklist and the QA module screenshot to Paul by May 6th. wrote, guys. That's our updated process. So I want to make sure you know that we've just got a couple of minutes here, but I'd love to hear from anybody who still feels maybe a little unclear or has, as we've already received some really good questions of food for thought of this updated process. I'd love to hear them. So what questions do you all have for us? Well, to think that the lines are quiet because we're so incredibly airtight and crystal clear with our processes, but I know that in reality, some of this takes some time to sink in, and there are some other members of your teams that are going to need to get this information. So if questions do pop up along the way, I'll certainly invite you to pick up the phone and give me or Paul a call or shoot us an email. I think everybody has this information by now, possibly on speed dial, but give Paul or I a call or send us an email if anything comes up. You can expect a follow-up email from me. It just kind of depends on how quickly WebEx is able to wrap up our recording, but I'll send out a link to the recording of today's webinar as well as the slide deck from today's webinar so that you can then pass it along to members of your team who are able to attend, and I'll make sure that I also connect with our colleagues who weren't able to attend today's webinar at all. So with that, I'll give one more request for any comments, concerns, or questions.
Well, this is Michelle. Would it be possible to send the PowerPoint sooner than the recording? I think Monique could on what the PowerPoint said, and interested in knowing what was going on.
I can send that out this afternoon. I will send the PowerPoint out to everybody so that you have it close at hand. Happy to do it. Anything else that would be good for the greater group to talk about before we wish you a happy day? That I will thank you for your time this afternoon. I'm hoping that this was clear and you're as excited as we are to test out this new process. We will absolutely be in touch and be here to support you as we move through this transition. And you can expect some follow-up from me in terms of the PowerPoint coming your way as well as the recording to share with your teammates. So with that, I will say have a great afternoon and we will talk soon. Take care, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Everybody.
Bye.
Bye.